A most original and creative talent in our business. Would you welcome Mr. Orson Welles?
Ladies and gentlemen, Orson Welles again, come to call for another visit.
Good evening. This is Orson Welles.
Stay tuned.
Right after this episode.
For our discussion.
Good morning, this is Orson Welles speaking. I'd like to read to you an affidavit. I, Isaac Woodard, Jr., being duly sworn, do depose and state as follows, that I am 27 years old and a veteran of the United States Army, having served for 15 months in the South Pacific and earned 1 battle star. I was honorably discharged on February 12, 1946, from Camp Gordon, Georgia, at 8:30 p.m. at the Greyhound Terminal, Atlanta, Georgia. While I was in uniform, I purchased a ticket to Winnsboro, South Carolina, and took the bus headed there to pick up my wife to come to New York to see my father and mother. About 1 hour out of Atlanta, the bus driver stopped at a small drugstore. As he stopped, I asked him if he had time to wait for me until I had a chance to go to the restroom. He cursed and said no. When he cursed me, I cursed him back. When the bus got to Aiken, he got off and went and got the police. They didn't give me a chance to explain. The policeman struck me with a billy across my head and told me to shut up. After that, the policeman grabbed me by my left arm and twisted it behind my back. I figured he was trying to make me resist. I did not resist against him. He asked me, was I discharged? And I told him yes. And when I said yes, that is when he started beating me with a billy, hitting me across the top of the head. After that, I grabbed his billy and wrung it out of his hand. Another policeman came up and threw his gun on me and told me to drop the billy, or he'd drop me, so I dropped the billy. After I dropped the billy, the second policeman held his gun on me while the other one was beating me. He knocked me unconscious. After I commenced to come to myself, he hollered, "Get up." When I started to get up, he started punching me in my eyes with the end of the billy. When I finally got up, he pushed me inside the jailhouse and locked me up. I woke up next morning and could not see. A policeman said, "Let's go up here and see what the judge says." I told him that I could not see how to come out. I was blind. He said, "Feel your way out." He said I'd be all right after I washed my face. He led me to the judge, and after I told the judge what happened, he said, "We don't have that kind of stuff down here." Then the policeman said, he wrung my billy out of my hand. I told him if he didn't drop it, I'd drop him. That's how I knew it was the same policeman as had beat my eyes out. After that, the judge spoke and said, "I fine you $50 or 30 days in the road." And I said I'd pay the $50, but I did not have the $50 at the time. So the policeman said, "You have some money there in your wallet." He took my wallet and took out all I had. And that was a total of $40, and took $4 from my watch pocket. I had a check for $694.73, which was my mustering out pay and soldier's deposit. He said to me, "Can you see how to sign this check? You have a government check." I told him no, sir. So he gave it back to me after that. Took me back and locked me up in the jail. The policeman did. I stayed in there for a while, and after a few minutes, he came and asked me if I wanted a drink of whiskey. If I took a drink of whiskey, he said I'd feel better. I told him no, sir. Didn't care for any. About 5:30 that evening, they took me to the Veterans Hospital in Columbia, South Carolina. One of the contact men came around one day and said to me they were going to take out a pension for me. I believe that the doctor who cared for me was named Dr. Clarence. I told him what had happened to me. He made no comment, but told me I should join a blind school. Sworn to me, it was 23rd day of April, 1946. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I had that affidavit in my pocket a few hours before dawn. When I left off worrying about this broadcast long enough for coffee at an all-night restaurant, I found myself joined at the table by a stranger. A nice, soft-spoken, well-meaning, well-mannered stranger he was. He told me a joke. He thinks it's a joke. I'm going to repeat it, but not for your amusement. I earnestly hope that nobody listening will laugh. This is the joke. It seems there was a white man who came on business to a southern town, it could be Aiken, South Carolina, and found he couldn't get a bed in any of the good hotels. He went to the bad hotels and found the flop houses, but there was no room for him in any of the inns reserved for white folks in that southern city. So at last, in desperation, he applied at a Negro hotel where he was accepted with a proviso that he would consent to share a double room with another guest. With rueful gratitude, this white man paid his bill, left to call for early in the morning. He rested well, quite undisturbed by the proximity of the sleeping colored man beside him, and was awakened at the hour of his request. After breakfast, he left for the railway station where he boarded his appointed train, but the conductor would not let him into any of the regular coaches. The man was told quite rudely to go where he belonged, the Jim Crow car. The hero of this funny story allowed he hadn't washed in the morning, that the dust of travel must be responsible for the conductor's grievous social miscalculation. He went to the washroom. He started to clean his hands. They were black, an even hue of black. Then he looked into the mirror. His face was the same color. He not only looked darker than white, he was quite visibly a Negro. A great oath precedes the final line, which is presumed to be the funny part of this little anecdote. I know what's happened to the next words of the man. It's very simple. They woke up the wrong man. I left the teller of this tale in the coffee shop, but I found I couldn't leave the tale itself. Like the affidavit I read to you at the start of the broadcast, it seems to have become a permanent part of my mental luggage. I sketched in my imagination a sequel to the strangest funny joke. I saw the man of business who'd gone to bed, a white man, getting into an argument with the conductor. I saw a policeman boarding the train at the next station and taking the man of business out on the platform and beating the eyes out of his head because the man thought he should be treated with the same respect he had received the day before when he was white. I saw men at the police station trying to make him take a drink so that the medical authorities could testify that he was drunk. I saw the man of business bleeding in his cell, reaching out with sightless hands through unseen bars, gesturing for help that could not ever come. And I heard his explanation echoing down the stone hallways of the jail. I know what's happened. It's very simple. They woke up the wrong man. Now, it seems the officer of the law who blinded the young Negro boy of the affidavit has not been named. The boy saw him while he could still see, but of course he had no way of knowing what particular policeman it was who brought the justice of Dachau and Oswiecim to Aiken, South Carolina. He was just another white man with a stick who wanted to teach a Negro boy a lesson, to show a Negro boy where he belonged, in the darkness. Till we know more about him, for just now, we'll call the policeman Officer X. He might be listening to this. I hope so. Officer X, I'm talking to you. Officer X, they woke up the wrong man. That somebody else, that man sleeping there, is you. The you that God brought into the world, all innocent of hate. A paid-up resident member of the Brotherhood of Man. Yes, unbelievably enough, that's you, Officer X. You, still asleep. That you could have been anything. It could have gone to the White House when it grew up. It could have gone to heaven when it died. But they woke up the wrong man. They finally came for him in the blank gray of dawn. As in the death house, they come for the condemned, but without prayers. They came with instructions, the accumulated ignorance of the feudal South. And with this peculiar briefing, they called Cain for another day of the devil's work, while Abel slept. Wash your hands, Officer X. Wash them well. Scrub and scour. You won't blot out the blood of a blinded war veteran. Nor yet the color of your skin, your own skin. You'll never, never, never change it. Wash your hands, Officer X. Wash a lifetime. You'll never wash away that leprous lack of pigment, the guilty pallor of the white man. We invite you to luxuriate in secrecy. It will be brief. Go on. Suckle your anonymous moment while it lasts. You're going to be uncovered. We will blast out your name. We'll give the world your given name, Officer X. Yes, and your so-called Christian name. It's going to rise out of the filthy deep like the dead thing it is. We're going to make it public with the public scandal you dictated but failed to sign. We pause now for a word from the philosophers. A short reminder regarding the matter of payment and cost. Nothing is paid back. That does not happen, not on earth. A favor cannot be paid back, neither can a wrong. We say a criminal pays for his crime when we lock him up, that a murderer pays for his murder when the state murders him, but really the state is hiding an unsightly object. Society is merely sweeping its dirt under the carpet. We may sometimes manage to cure the thing called crime, but the man called a criminal is never punished. He can be inconvenienced or tormented or done away with, but he cannot pay for what he has done. If the ledger is ever balanced, it is not by him, but by some other man having nothing to do with him. It is balanced by deeds of virtue, by unrelated good works. The evildoer's agony doesn't show on the books. Only that fiction known to us as money can be paid back. The true debt, the debt of a friend to a friend or a foe to a foe, outlives the principles involved. So much for payment. Price. That's something else. There's a price for everything. There's nothing that does not have its cost. Joy and inspiration and mere pleasure have a market value precisely computed in terms of their opposites. The cost of youth is age. The cost of age is death. Do you want love? The cost of love is independence. You want to be independent, do you? Then pay the price and know what it is to be alone. Your mother paid for you with pain. Nothing in this living world is free. The free air costs you the life-consuming effort of breath. Freedom itself is priced at the rate of the citizenship it earns and holds. What does it cost to be a Negro? In Aiken, South Carolina, it cost a man his eyes. What does it cost to wear over your skeleton the pinkish tint officially described as white? In Aiken, South Carolina, it cost a man his soul. Officer X may languish in jail. It's unlikely, but it's possible that he'll serve as long a term as a Negro would serve in Aiken, South Carolina, for stealing bread. But Officer X will never pay for the 2 eyes he beat out of the soldier's head. How can you essay the gift of sight? What are they quoting today for 1 eye? An eye for an eye? A literal reading of this Mosaic law spells out again only the blank waste of vengeance. We've told Officer X that he will be dragged out of hiding. We've promised him a most unflattering glare of publicity. We're going to keep that promise. We will build our own police lineup to line up this reticent policeman with the killers, the lunatics, the beast men, all the people of society's zoo where he belongs. If he's listening to this, let him listen well. Officer X, after I have found you out, I'll never lose you. If they try you, I'm going to watch the trial. If they jail you, I'm going to wait for your first day of freedom. You won't be free of me. I want to see who is waiting for you at the prison gates. I want to know who will acknowledge that they know you. I'm interested in your future. I will take careful note of all your destinations. Assume another name, and I will be careful that the name you would forget is not forgotten. I will find means to remove from you all refuge, Officer X. You can't get rid of me. We have an appointment, you and I, and only death can cancel it. Who am I? A masked avenger from the comic books? No, sir, merely an inquisitive citizen of America. I admit that nothing on this inhabited earth is capable of your chastisement. I'm simply but quite actively curious to know what will become of you. Your fate cannot affect the boy in the country hospital for the blind, but your welfare is a measure of the welfare of my country. I cannot call it your country. How long will you get along in these United States? Which of the states will still consent to get along with you? Where stands the sun of common fellowship? When will it rise over your dark country? When will it be noon in Georgia? I must know where you go, Officer X, because I must know where the rest of us are going with our American experiment. Into bankruptcy or into that serene tomorrow, that plenteous garden the blind soldier hoped for when he had his eyes and with eyes opened went to war. We want a word to lighten his darkness. You're sorry for him? He rejects your pity. You're ashamed? He doesn't care. We want to tell him soon that all America is ashamed of you. If there's room for pity, you can have it, for you're far more blind than he. He had eyes to see and saw with them, made out, if nothing else, at least a part of the shape of human dignity. And this is not a little thing, but you had eyes to see and you have never seen. He has the memory of light, but you were born in the pit. He cannot grow new eyes to open the world again for his poor bruised head. Never. No. The only word we can share the martyr with to carry him from the county hospital to the county grave is word concerning your eyes, Officer X. Your eyes, remember, were not gouged away. Only the lids are closed. You might raise the lids. You might just try the wild adventure of looking. You might see something. It might be a simple truth. One of those truths held to be self-evident by our founding fathers and by most of us. If we should ever find you bravely blinking at the sun, we'll know then that the world is young after all, that chaos is behind us and not ahead. Then there will be shouting of trumpets to rouse the dead at Gettysburg. A thunder of cannon will declare the tidings of peace, and all the bells of liberty will laugh out loud in the streets to celebrate goodwill towards all men. The new blind can hear. It'd be very good if they could hear the news that the old blind can finally see. Then, Officer X, you'll find that you can wash off what should be washed, and it will be said of you, yes, even you, that they awakened the right man. Now it's time to say goodbye. Please let me come to call again. Next week, same time. Until then, I remain as always, obediently yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, the American Broadcasting Company invites you to be with us again next Sunday afternoon at 1:15 o'clock over most of these very same stations, when we shall again hear from Mr. Orson Welles. This is ABC, the American Broadcasting Company.
Well, hello again. This is Buck Benny speaking. We have a lot of folks with us today. We're on Orson Welles This is a very famous episode, and we'll get all into that. I have Kathy Fuller Seeley here, and I have Terry Phillips, and we have Vincent Longo. And we get a lot of ground to cover because this is probably the most famous episode of the entire run of this thing. And it's going to be kind of the focus, I think, for the next 5 weeks or so. So we shall see. Anyway, let's get into it. And Kathy, why don't you give us a little of the background of what this is about and so forth? Because I think you've looked it up and you saw a special on PBS about it, I think.
Well, yes, and for any listeners, it's a 2021 season episode of PBS's The American Experience, and it's fascinating, and everybody should watch it because it's amazing American history and racial history, and it's really important, and we all need to know more about it. The show is put together as a kind of prehistory of the civil rights movement, or things happening right at the end of World War II that set the stage for the things we generally know more about, the efforts of Martin Luther King Jr. and the sit-ins, and that's the Montgomery bus boycott and all that. But this episode, as a historical moment, really is shocking and terrible, and the fact that it was happening so easily, that the minute the war is getting over, and this is a general, has been quite a theme for Orson. He's been very aware of the needs, the challenges, the problems that vets are having of getting home from Europe, finding housing, getting clothing, getting all the things they should have. So on the one hand, he's already very aware of what's happening to returning servicemen, and very much a theme is the things that America owes its servicemen. But like I said, this terrible incident happens in February 1946 with an African American soldier. Now, maybe I guess he's a Navy fellow. He's been in the Pacific. Now that's my colleague.
Army.
I think Army. He'd been a longshoreman in the Pacific Theater and had actually won medals and seen battle, and so he gets discharged in early 1946 from I believe from Augusta, Georgia, a base there, and he is just trying. He's gotten his discharge papers and he's going home in his uniform to go see his wife. And then, because I believe his parents had already moved to New York, he was seeing his wife and perhaps going to then go with her, move her up to New York City to begin his post-war life. The PBS special does an amazing job of sort of recreating the feel of that journey. It's got amazing historical footage of African Americans serving in World War II, the excitement of the war being over, this hope for the future now that troops had served so valiantly. And then this horrible thing happens.
Kathy, do you know the actual title of the episode by any chance, or how
it might be called The Blinding of Isaac Woodard.
Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay. And this is all, of course, we're going to be talking about Mr. Woodard, and certainly Orson focuses the entire episode on that. And it's probably the most intense episode of the entire series that I can think of. And Orson, we really get a very animated, upset Orson in this episode. Vincent, you want to go from there?
Yeah, so I have a couple things. As Kathy said, this is certainly a culmination of themes and ideas that Welles has been bringing up, most generally racial inequality, particularly in the Jim Crow South. We had episodes before about voting rights and the Ku Klux Klan. We've also had mentions of Black servicemen, Black veterans, and particularly the struggles that they have, but also rhetorically used as a symbol of how deep this hatred and oppression goes, even to our veterans. And here is another case of that. There's some indication that the NAACP encouraged Welles to bring up this case, because as you'll notice, the affidavit is dated months before. So this isn't just a thing that happened yesterday. Welles saw it in the news it didn't really make the news. And so Welles is making it into the news, and he does it with complete and lack of restraint in I think in the most positive way possible. I think a couple things to keep in mind here for me is that one of the things the affidavit does so well is make it clear how easily this happened to him, even as a Black veteran in uniform at that time, right? It wasn't just the police. It started with the bus, and the bus driver wouldn't even let him go to the bathroom. And when he did go to the bathroom, or when he was going to go to the bathroom, he, yelled at him, and then the guy yelled back and thought that was the end of it. But then that escalated to the police, and then it was all the police people. It was the police people in the jail. Then it was the judge, even the hospital. We see these systemic issues that the affidavit brings up. The hospital doesn't say anything about it. They're just like, well, you're going to have to find a blind school, and so, it paints this really horrible picture, not only of certain people doing bad things, which of course it does, but it also points to these larger issues where this is being reinforced. The other thing that I appreciate about Welles's attack is just how well put together it is. He performs it in a way that I think is sincere, but also this is well written, right? I mean, the things he says are so calculated, and he goes after this officer in many different ways. I mean, for once he says, you can't even be called Christian. He makes a joke about, oh, whatever your Christian name is, I can't, then he says, you're not American. I can't even call this your country. He also does something which is very typical of leftists in Welles's group, which he compares American racism, particularly in the Jim Crow South, to the actions of Nazis. He specifically mentions, bringing over Dachau into the United States. So these are
That's the word he said.
Yes. Yeah. These are very common moves for Orson Welles, but together, I mean, it's just really a tour de force of name calling, creative name calling, bashing. So I really appreciate that. The last thing I want to say is, I think Orson Welles deserves a lot of credit. This is the first of many episodes, as we've said, but, he could have taken his promise at the end further, which couldn't have been more clear. He promises, I will find out your name. I will never let you forget it. I will come to when, if you even go to prison, because he says you're probably not going to go to prison. You'll probably get slapped on the wrist, as if you, what does he say? An African-American who steals bread will get more prison time than you.
Which, let me just jump in there for a second.
Yeah, please.
That kind of surprised me, because I thought at this time, I didn't know if even Orson would have the awareness of the culture at that point. I would have thought he might have said something like, and when you come to trial, they will find you guilty. You will go to jail. This is going to happen because no one can forgive this kind of thing. And yet he already knew that that's not the way the system worked, and that he was not going to be found guilty. And that, to me, kind of surprised me of the 1946. But we certainly know that there was things going on in the 20s and the 30s that folks were getting away with lynchings and so forth.
Right.
And it's just, it was interesting to hear him approach it that way, like that was already a done deal, that he wasn't going to be found guilty, but they were going to hound him. He was going to hound him anyway and make sure that he didn't get away with this, other than the fact that the courts wouldn't find him guilty. But
yeah, I think this is, in his mind, I'm going to make it the worst it can be, because I'm probably the only one who's going to collectively do anything. I have like he says other times, I have a microphone. I'm going to make sure that this gets, out there. And so, I tried to see how far Welles took this. And we're going to talk about Welles doing a very good job of campaigning for Woodard at this period of time. The last time that Welles mentions the Woodard case, and particularly the horrible actions of Linwood Shull, which is the name of the police officer, is in 1955. Welles is doing a television show called The Orson Welles Sketchbook. And the whole episode is about the police, although it's about the police, in a more broad sense, about individual privacy. But he begins by telling the story. He doesn't mention Shull's name, but he just says, I was on the radio and I, made sure he went to trial, essentially. But that's it. he doesn't say his name. He doesn't really call him out. And so I thought, this could be a moment where he could really chastise him. Unfortunately, I think what Welles doesn't want to bring attention to is the fact that he was right. Shull did not get persecuted in any way. He retired admirably from the police force, continuing his job as chief of police. Also, the trial was made out to be an attack on the Southern way, of dealing with race. And so the defense.
Let's go back for a second, Vincent. You said he's chief of police. Was he chief of police when this happened? Oh, okay. All right.
Yes.
Because I didn't realize that piece. I guess I didn't connect that together.
It was a very small town. The town that Orson gets wrong, I don't know if it was wrong in the affidavit or whether at the time Mr. Woodard wrote it. He didn't, as I said, he had some memory, some amnesia after all of this. Yeah. And it was dark and he didn't know what town it was. Turns out to be the very tiny town of Batesville, South Carolina, not Aiken. And then I can tell you stories later that the people of Aiken chose this moment to go after Orson Welles, and they burned his pictures and they boycotted his films. And so they say, how dare you, Mr. Northerner, dare to tell us that, anything about what's going on down
there.
So,
what a brilliant thing to do instead of looking at the reality and saying, well, maybe we need to fix things.
But this is how incredibly deeply ingrained that attitude was.
Well, let's go over to Terry and see what Terry has to add to our discussion here.
Well, first, I want to build on what Vincent said about Orson Welles' presentation. I was thinking about how odd it is that we have awards for great performances in the movies and on television, and I don't remember that there was anything equivalent to the Oscars or the Emmys for radio performances.
Only the Peabodys, which were just getting started at this point. And so you're right. The Peabodys were just starting in 1946.
Well, so if there had been an equivalent of the Oscar or the Emmy awards for radio, Orson Welles would have clearly won for this one performance. It was masterful, well written, and very, very effectively executed. You could feel it. I mean, it grabs you as you listen to this commentary. It's electrifying. A couple of historical notes. In 2019, so as we're recording this 2 years ago, a book was written by a federal judge in South Carolina. The author's name is Richard Gergel, and he essentially succeeded the bench position of the judge who ruled in this case when it was brought as a federal civil rights case. The book is called Unexampled Courage: The Blinding of Sergeant Isaac Woodard, and it's a long subtitle, and The Awakening of President Harry S. Truman and Judge J. Watties Waring. Judge Waring was a federal judge at the time. And just to dial back a little bit, after the travesty of a trial in which Mr. Woodard was found guilty of misbehaving on a bus and resisting arrest and so forth, and fined $50, and he didn't have $50, and so they stole $44 that he had in his wallet, and even tried to get him to sign over his military separation check, which he couldn't do because he was blind. He couldn't even see the check for them to steal the 600 and some odd dollars that he had from coming to him from the federal government. So after all that, news got to Washington of what had happened. The same NAACP officials who had told Orson Welles about this case eventually got to Harry Truman, and he was furious, outraged that this could happen. Now, up until this point, there had not really been much of a civil rights movement in America. There had been some, small efforts made, but nothing really serious at a national level. Harry Truman changed all that. It eventually, by the way, led to the integration of the armed forces. But Truman set up the first Civil Rights Commission as a result of being outraged by this affair in South Carolina. And then they brought federal charges against these same police officers, both Scholl, who was the police chief, and I think 4 other policemen who were involved in the beating of Mr. Woodard. And the judge, who's the same judge who wrote this book, wrote about the judge who presided over the case. That judge, Judge Waring, said that he considered the trial to be a travesty because of how badly the federal prosecutor brought the charges. They didn't have many witnesses. They didn't bring evidence, so to speak of. And he later wrote, "I was shocked by the hypocrisy of my government in submitting this disgraceful case." Obviously, again, Scholl, the police officer, was not convicted, and it was, heaping insult to injury onto Mr. Woodard. Just one more point about that trial. The defense attorney at one point told the jury, quote, "If you rule against Scholl," meaning the police officer, "then let this South Carolina secede again." And he later shouted racial epithets at Woodard. And of course, the jury found Scholl not guilty on all charges. So this was really the last straw for Harry Truman and for Judge Waring, who went on to be a champion of civil rights in his own time. And finally, the author of this book, Judge Gergel, among other things, presided over the trial of Dylan Roof, who was the man who killed all those people in the Charleston church. A couple quick things about the process. As we know, this beating took place on February 12th, 1946, which was the day that Mr. Woodard was separated from, was discharged from the armed forces. And as Kathy, as you pointed out, he was trying to get home and then eventually to New York, which is where he ended up living in the Bronx. So the indictment, the initial trial, that travesty of a trial, took place right away, and it was a joke, as was the routine when an African American was charged with a crime in the South in the 40s and 50s. So then the federal indictment was brought in October of that year, which is, if you think about it, really, really fast. And the verdict was in November. November the 5th was when, again, the result was not guilty of the accusation. The very last thing I want to say is about Wells' recurring theme in his commentary. Listen for it. He said, "You woke the wrong man." And he meant that metaphorically. He says it several times. You have to listen carefully for it, but it's a beautiful bit of writing. And I only wish that Orson Welles could have been given all the awards in the world for what later turned out to be the key the key message in bringing this to public attention. Up until now, and but for Orson Welles, it's possible nobody would have heard of this horrific crime. But here we are 75 years later, and we really know what happened.
Yeah.
Terry, thank you so much for that and for telling us about the book. The PBS special, it's 90 minutes long, is based on the book and really does go through all this and gives you the sense that, that Thurgood Marshall was the lead attorney for the legal counsel for the NAACP. And so the special and Gergel's book does a really terrific job of mixing sort of legal precedent with individual sort of awakenings, becoming woke to the issue, and what individuals are trying to do to figure out this puzzle of how do you change the system, and so the special even gets into the fact that all of this led to trying to use the tactic of saying that segregation is not separate but equal, but that essentially hurts like Black children in education. And this is where the sociologists' experimentation with showing young children Black dolls and white dolls, and that time after time after time, little African-American children would pick the white doll as the prettiest one and reject a brown-skinned doll. And that's what Marshall would use for eventually what would become Brown versus the Board of Education, the saying segregated schools are unequal. And you see when trying that it's such a multi-pronged effort to and this is that word we're not supposed to be talking about, critical race theory, but it really gets to the point of these outrageous things happening. And how do you dismantle a system in the South that is socially, culturally, legally so bound together that any individual can say, it's not my fault, I'm just following the rules? How do you start to break down and change those rules? You've got indeed Harry Truman trying to do it from a federal level, and then the states go states' rights. You've got, so all these different tactics by using education, by using votes, by using churches, so all these, it's fascinating and horrifying that it took so many years, that this poor Mr. Woodard's, this horrible thing happened to him in 1946. And basically it took till 25 to 30 years later to really, make a difference and get those laws passed. But it's a fascinating story, and I'm so glad you knew about the book, and I can still highly recommend. It's one of the best American Experience episodes I've really seen. It really blends these things well.
And Kathy, you then might enjoy hearing Judge Gergel make the presentation that he did at the National Archives, I believe it was, and I can send you a link. And
terrific! I'd like that.
You might want to post that here.
That'd be great if you'd share the link with all of us. That'd be good.
Sure, of course. And he points out in his presentation that Judge Waring, who was again the presiding judge in the federal trial, got into lots of trouble. The KKK, burned crosses in front of his house. He was married to a Northern woman, so that didn't sit well with folks in South Carolina. He brought action against the Democratic Party for excluding African Americans from the primaries at that time. And they tried to claim that it was, a private club. And he said, no, this is unconstitutional, which was, again, another step in the process. But it was, you mentioned Brown versus Board of Education, which overturned Plessy versus Ferguson, if I remember correctly. And so the Southern cases Thurgood Marshall's own advocacy were what led to that later Brown decision making separate but equal no longer permissible. It is such powerful history, and again, but for Orson Welles, we might not know just how bad things were. Yes, there's a kind of a general understanding among some people, but this was palpable. This made it really, really effective.
You're so right, Terry. I did some research on because I'm one of those nerds on newspaper archives, but there is no reference to this in white newspapers at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But the African American press is talking about it where they can. But even when you say, Vincent, that Orson on television in 1955 doesn't say anything, there was still plenty of censorship. I'm sure in 1955, still in the middle of all this, hit the sponsors of the TV show, the network, so many people would have come along and say, you cannot talk about this. So that makes it even more interesting and challenging when to try and find the evidence and try and find the circulation of this information, because it is kept out of official sources as much as possible, but would have been talked about hopefully in local NAACP meetings and between people. But as a marvelous book called Coming of Age in Mississippi by Ann Moody says, in Mississippi, if 3 African Americans got together and started talking, NAACP, their house would be burnt down. So just as you've said, Daryl, when you wonder why people haven't been talking about it before, or what, a lot of people willfully didn't know what was going on, but a lot of other people knew, but they couldn't talk in ways that we could. So that's what makes this Orson Welles broadcast so amazing. It's somebody saying in public what a lot of people have been too afraid to be able to say.
Yeah, well, and it's just sad the way that NAACP becomes a negative thing to so many people to talk about it. The critical race theory is a negative thing we can't talk about. We can't even talk about the nuance of it. The Black Lives Matter becomes a negative statement that immediately turns people off as soon as you say it. I've been thinking about how I was going to say this. So what I would say is, what we're trying to say is Black lives should be of equal importance to white lives. That if you're going to have a lawyer, the lawyer should work as hard for the Black person as he does for the white person, as he does for the Asian person. And that we should have, everything should theoretically be equal. The saying they come back with, all lives matter, is true. It should be true. That is the goal. The problem is all lives currently and in the past haven't mattered equally in our country, and that's a sad thing. And we need to get that addressed. And some of the ways of getting addressed are by making it known, whether that's teaching critical race theory, which I don't think it is necessarily that way, but I don't want to eliminate the fact that we can learn about things like this in school, everywhere. It's nothing, it does no good to try and hide the past or try and cover up the past. We always need to learn from the past and try and make things better. And I feel like Orson was trying to do that left and right on this series. And right now he's changing his direction to say, okay, let's look at this because this is really important. I mean, I cannot imagine anyone saying putting someone's eyes out with a baton by a police officer is okay in any situation. I mean, it's just crazy that would be somehow seen as acceptable and that he could get away with that. It's just an amazing presentation that Orson does here, and we'll see in upcoming weeks where we go from there. And anything else anyone wants to mention before we head out?
I would just like to add that the people of Aiken, South Carolina, were understandably upset when Orson Welles misidentified them rather than Batesburg, which is where this actually took place. But years later, there was an apology issued by the town of Aiken to Orson Welles. They had wanted him to apologize to them. They later said, "We're sorry for what happened. You know, this was a stain on our reputation as South Carolinians, as Southerners, as Americans." And it doesn't make up, of course, for what happened, but we also can't say that nothing has changed. Among other things, the Democratic Party has changed. I mean, it went from being the scourge of supporting slavery and racism to the party that is clearly 180 degrees from that. But it is still, I mean, you're right there. There's still so much work to do. We have made progress, but progress is a lousy word because it suggests that things are better. And for so many people, things are not better.
Right. Or not as much better as they should be.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. And because we'll have plenty more weeks to talk about this as we go. A real treat for all of you to hear this very special presentation. Please go listen, go watch on PBS the special Kathy has been talking about. I'm going to try and watch that this week. I think that'll be good for all of us, and it'll give you a more informed view of these upcoming 5 weeks or so of Orson's commentaries.